Stelios Rammos is the co-founder of Geyser, a Bitcoin crowdfunding platform built on the Lightning Network. In our conversation, we discussed how Geyser works, the pros and cons of Fiat crowdfunding platforms, the ways in which Geyser and the Lightning Network can improve accessibility for fundraisers. We also discussed stablecoins, censorship resistance, and the Geyser Roadmap. As always, this is a Lightning podcast, so if you enjoy this show, if you learn something new, the best way you can let me know is by sending in sats, comments, or questions over the Lightning Network. I read every single comment and question at the end of the show. We are quickly approaching 600,000 sats sent in to date, so thank you all for sending in sats. Quick shout out before we get into the episode. Today's show is sponsored by Voltage. Voltage is the next generation provider and industry standard for Lightning Network infrastructure. We will have more from Voltage later in the show in the lightning round. Stelios, thank you for coming on the show today. Let's start things off with a background on Geyser. I would love to know more about why you decided to build it.
Yeah, sure thing. So Geyser, well, first of all, we're two people founding this business. Myself, Stelios, and Mick is the second guy. And so initially, Mick got approached me and said, "Well, look, we're both on Twitter. We see what's happening on Twitter. We see there's a lot of ideas going around. There's a lot of Bitcoiners in particular that have great ideas. They want to build stuff, and it gains traction. People talk about it, but then it kind of dies off there. And so it would be great to actually take whatever ideas people have there and give them a platform where they can sort of put the tweets and then discuss it with people, raise some funds for it, and really just take it from the implementation, or rather the idea to the implementation. Just take it from the grounds up. And so that was sort of the initial approach on the idea. And from there, it evolved and it went into a lot of different avenues that I'm sure we're going to cover. But initially, really, it was for Bitcoiners, just seeing Bitcoiners having great ideas and not doing a lot with them.
Now, I believe you previously built something called Spark, and this is a kind of a tool to automate Bitcoin giveaways over the Lightning Network. Can you talk to me a little bit about what you took from that and what you learned from that process and then applied into Geyser?
That's right. I didn't really think you were gonna bring that one up, but Spark was sort of my first hobby project on Lightning. So I got into Lightning around 2018, I would say. And then I really struggled getting it at first. I actually heard it a while back from 2017. It had different touch points. And my background is in computer science. So the technical side was really interesting, but it wasn't something easy to get to grasp with. And I think the best way to really get an understanding over a technology is to actually start to use it. So again, same kind of similar to Geyser, I was browsing Twitter and seeing these people doing giveaways. You probably saw that as well in the comments. Like, yeah, put your invoice and I'll send you some sats so you can test it out. And I thought, well, okay, that's pretty time consuming. We should probably automate that. And so Spark came along. I just built this service where you could take any tweet, put a budget on it, and then people would get rewards for their retweets, for the comments. And well, what did I learn from that? Well, first of all, you can build on Lightning, right? It's scary, but at first it's scary, but really it isn't. So anyone can do it. And the second thing was really the power of this community. I put this one out. I saw that so many people it gained traction within days, right? There were some pretty large accounts back then that retweeted it and were curious to hear more about it. And so it kind of really showed me how many people are really into this community, how powerful the community can be, and just how encouraging it is to start building something on Lightning. And that's the way that I got to know Mick in the first place. He saw the project and we had a few back and forths back then, and then he came back to me with the idea, but that was initially how we got to know each other. So never built Spark thinking that it would become anything really important. In fact, I sort of terminated the project along the way, but it opened a lot of doors and certainly taught me a lot about Lightning and how you can build some cool stuff.
Yeah. So now with Geyser, if you think about the road ahead and the impact it could have on the community, where does your mind lead to? Like, what are some of the use cases you think that are really going to be impacted by Geyser?
For sure. Well, initially I said it's for Bitcoiners, right? And it's going to bring ideas into the world and be the sort of launchpad for ideas. Um, but really along the way, we realized it's actually a little bit bigger than that. Um, and we can get into what traditional crowdfunding platforms do. But before we get into that, I'll just keep it to Bitcoiners. And I think there's still a lot that can be done here with this sort of aspect of communities. And I know that communities is sort of a term that has been taken and corporate marketing has distorted it a little bit. So I don't want to talk about it as this sort of community. But an interesting sort of tweet I was seeing the other day is that people call Bitcoiners a sect, and they've probably forgotten what it is like to have a community. I think that speaks more to the type of community that we're talking about. This is like people that share a common values. It's people that share a common vision, a common objective, and they all want to aid each other into bringing the Bitcoin adoption. And so, what I see Geyser as an interesting project and a good tool for Bitcoin adoption is that it can really help people take these good ideas and make something out of them. And again, it's not something that would not be possible without Geyser, but I just see it as one more tool that people can use, one more platform in this case that people can use to raise funds or to bring awareness to their project. And I guess that's really where we also want to take it. We want this aspect of the social aspect to be as important as the funding aspect on Geyser. And so we're bringing all these social features. You can connect it to your Twitter. You can sort of port the reputations that you have from Twitter. We have ambassadors that can support a project not financially, but sort of by putting their, you could say, staking in a way their reputation. And so it's just we have this massive network of people, and it's good to leverage it in some ways and to bring a lot of attention on projects that are worth it.
Right. So let's start with a background of the current or fiat crowdfunding platforms today, right? Some of the big ones, GoFundMe, Indiegogo. There's a bunch of them. There's probably dozens that I just don't know all the names of, but maybe we can start with, because all these came to be in the internet era, right? Like all this bubbled up in the last 10 years or so. What do you think these platforms got right? And then what do you think they're doing wrong now? Like why is there a need for a new solution? So maybe if we can start with like, what did they do right to get to this point? And then what are they doing wrong and kind of opening the door for Geyser to offer a better solution?
Yeah, good question. Well, you mentioned there's probably dozens out there, but the three that you mentioned, so Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and GoFundMe, they account for probably 90% of the market. So clearly they've done something right. And if we look at Kickstarter in particular, they were one of the very first ones to take this idea of funding projects and creatives. So they really took the creative industry, the gaming, board games, artists, and they put a lot of focus around that, around sort of the culture of crowdfunding. And I think they nailed that one. They really nailed that one because when you think about crowdfunding, even just the term in itself, it's the crowd and funding. So you need the crowd to even make the funding. And that's where Kickstarter really nailed it. They took the crowds that were passionate about a particular topic, which was artists, art, creation, and they just doubled down on that. and they did it really well, right? When you look at Kickstarter, they basically created a new industry. Back when they started, can't remember now, maybe 2011, somewhere around that, the internet age, as you said, they were kind of alone. And so they did that great. But then you kind of go deeper into that and you realize that they're operating in around 30 to 35 countries. And that's not the internet era. The internet era is to open it up to everyone, right? It should be global. We think about information. Information travels freely or close to freely. And that's what the internet era should be about. So when we think about Kickstarter, we think about Indiegogo, we think they're global because they're on the internet, but they're not, right? They're really not. They're very oriented towards the West, and they exclude a very large portion of the population, which is mostly, Africa, South America, and some countries in Southeast Asia. So we're that's not okay for us. We want to change that, right? And not just us, but Bitcoin changes that. Because when you think about why they're not operating globally, the greatest barrier is the currency that they're using. They're using Stripe for the most part to process payments, and there's a lot of regulations around that as well. And so they're restricted and they're not doing that the right way, in my opinion. And then the second thing is not only are they not operating globally, but also in the countries that they're operating in, we've seen some forms of censorship. And I'm sure we can get into that as well.
Right. Okay, so now that we have a good understanding of like what some of those problems are with current platforms, how do you think about using Bitcoin and Lightning to solve those problems? Like, where are we at now in Bitcoin and Lightning's maturity? Are we at the point where we can now use these technologies to offer a better solution today? Is it going to take a few more years? Where are we at in that stage? And what are the specific features of Lightning that make it a better solution?
It will be gradual. I would be lying if I said that Lightning is ready today as it is, but we certainly share that vision that Bitcoin is the better money. Bitcoin is the best money, right? This is the foundation of this new economy that we're building. Bitcoin is censorship resistant. It is the best form of money. It's been repeated over and over again, and I don't want to go over these arguments, but we sort of take this as our base foundation. And then what Lightning does when coming on top of that is that it also makes it scalable to the world. So it makes it scalable, it makes it accessible to people, and it makes small transactions that would be prohibitive on the base layer, maybe not today, but down the line, it makes those possible as well. And so it was a natural fit to think about, using Lightning for a crowdfunding platform that is, as I said, global, right? So it was just a natural fit to use Lightning, and it's a technical solution as well, and one that will gradually reach mass adoption, but we certainly have a lot of hurdles still to go beyond. And I can go into more details into those if that's something that we can cover. But yeah, I do think that it will be the best solution to scale Bitcoin.
Yeah. What are some of the early kind of success stories or early signs of progress you guys are seeing on your end? Maybe it's people starting their own fundraising campaigns. What are some of and maybe some of the behaviors that users are showing on the platform? Like, are users interacting with fundraising campaigns differently than you'd expect? Can you speak to some of the stories of people who have already gone through a fundraising campaign and their kind of results with it so far?
Yeah, the first myth I want to bust is that Bitcoiners don't spend their Bitcoin, right? If anything, I think that's the first myth we've proven sort of wrong. And I would rephrase that to Bitcoiners don't spend their Bitcoin on the things that they don't care about. And so this sort of consumerism we can think of people buying useless stuff. Well, sure, Bitcoiners are more conservative on the things they spend their Bitcoin on. But when it's something that is close to their heart, they will certainly support projects. And the first success story of Geyser, but really not of Geyser, but of the project itself, is the first crowdfunding project that we had on the platform, and that is raising funds for a Bitcoin conference in Lagos. And the guy is called Apata. He's in Lagos, Nigeria. He reached out to us at the very beginning, and his vision was kind of clear as well. He wanted to bring education, financial education, Bitcoin education to Lagos. And so we were talking about it a few times, and then the idea sort of came out that we should make a conference, or he should organize a conference in Lagos. And so we put the project on the platform. It raised around 1,400 USD. I received donations from over 100 people, and the conference actually happened last Saturday, and it had a small, humble attendance. But the real key part is that it really does feel like planting seeds in different places on the earth, right? So you're never going to start with a Bitcoin conference 2022 kind of scale. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You're just bringing this little seed and planting it in different spots on Earth, and then these will come out to be new communities all over the world. And that was really, really empowering.
Mm-hmm.
And then you asked me about the funders and how they interact with the platform. And
Yeah.
sort of my favorite one to bring, my favorite story to bring from the funders, which for the most part are anonymous, by the way. So we don't know that much about them. But for those that did fund not anonymously, we reached out to a few. And the one that really stuck to me was, I'm not going to name names, but he was a guy from Suriname. And he funded around $15 to Apata. And the reason it really stuck with me is because it made really concrete what our hypothesis had been of making it global. Really thinking about it, there was no other way this guy from Suriname could have supported Apata in Nigeria and make this transaction, make this small transaction instantly with no fees. We know the drill. It was really the only way it could have been made possible. And it's such an empowering thought and feeling to just see an economy opening up. It's like for the first time, you had two people communicate and interact in some way that could not have been possible before. I imagine it was a similar feeling to email in the early days of email when someone was, receiving an email from a friend across the Atlantic or something, and really realizing that they're now a lot closer than they used to be.
Yeah, that's a really cool story. So do you think that, are you noticing any changes in like the size of payments people are sending through or the frequency? Does anything about Lightning, and because it's this like instant and low cost way to transfer money, does that change the the average sizes of transactions? Do you think it's going to speed up or increase the throughput of transactions? Like people are going to start to fund more projects because there's lower barriers. Does any of that change, or do you think that's mostly going to stay the same?
That's pretty interesting. We ran some analytics on some crowdfunding projects, and we sort of noticed that around 80% of donations were done through Lightning, but around 80% of the value was done through on-chain. So most people transacted with Lightning, and most value transacted on-chain. Now, this is very early to say whether that's because of Lightning or that's because of people not knowing about Lightning and how that will sort of evolve. But what I find interesting here is that what you're transacting and how much you're transacting is just one part of the equation. The other part is the sort of signaling that you're doing by supporting a project. And we go back to the social aspect of supporting a project, and that is you could send one Satoshi, but if you're sending it with a nice comment, if you're showing that you're a supporter, if you're doing it even anonymously, you're just one more guy that showed support for the project. And that has value in itself. It doesn't matter if it was one Satoshi. And so how it will evolve, whether Lightning transactions will remain small or whether they will grow, that's TBD. But what is for sure is that, as you said, it lowered this barrier to entry. And now traditional crowdfunding platforms, you can send maybe $1 as the minimum. Now you can send a thousandth of a dollar. And that opens up new opportunities. It opens up new interactions where funding sort of takes a second place, second spot, and it becomes all about social interactions. That could be a comment, that could be just earning a badge on a project, or any other sort of interaction that you can think of.
Right. Yeah, that's something that I've noticed a lot with podcasting side of things right now. So listeners can send in comments and questions to this episode, and they've been doing it for the last 30, 35 episodes. And you're right, like sometimes you get like someone sends in one sat, and it doesn't matter because like they made that effort, and you're like, wow, that's really cool. And then they also sent in like a great comment. And sometimes the comments are more valuable than the sats. And sometimes you're just like, wow, that's just a really thoughtful and kind comment. And it's great to see that. And then, it also makes it a lot more rewarding for the person sending it in, because they want it's rewarding for them to send that comment and to make to say great job or keep it up or whatever it is. So I agree. There's definitely like a component that goes beyond just the money, and yeah, it's interesting to see how that will evolve over time. Let's go into the specifics of using Geyser today. Can you walk me through what the process is going to be like for if I've got a brand new project, I want to start raising funds for it. I have an idea. How do I go through this process? How do people then send money? And then how do I receive it? And what kind of the timeline is on that?
Sure. We're very early still. Geyser is super early in its inception. So we're really funder facing at the moment, which means that someone that wants to create a project, they have to reach out to us, let us know about the idea, and then we kind of work with them to put the project on the platform. And we're going to open this up in the coming months. We don't really want to be the arbitrator, to some extent, maybe to rule out very egregious illegal activity, but beyond that, we don't want to be blocking any sort of project. So eventually they'll be able to just log in on Geyser and start their project, start their idea. Now, the question of receiving funds, that is something that we want to offer a lot of different options and a lot of different possibilities, mostly depending on what the users themselves want and the sort of trade-offs that they want on this funding solution. So when you think about custodial, non-custodial, right, these are the two main categories, but then it's really a spectrum in between those two. So you have fully custodial solutions where the funds would flow, let's say, to Geyser, and then Geyser would distribute them to the user. We're not doing that today. We don't really want to be a custodian. That is not our intention at the moment. So that is out of the question. But then even when you look at non-custodial, that is still a spectrum. Does the user run a node, for example? Are they tech savvy enough to run their own nodes? Do they know how to do liquidity management? Because we have to think that when someone raises funds, it's not the usual traditional Lightning node that you want to run for making small payments and buying your groceries or all that kind of stuff. It's very skewed towards inbound liquidity. You need a lot of inbound liquidity to your node, and whatever that target goal is, you need to have as inbound. And inbound happens to be pretty costly today. So the 2 or 3 projects that we've put on the platform, they've raised anywhere between 10,000 or wanted to raise anywhere between 10,000 and a full Bitcoin. And it's very unlikely that someone that wants to raise a full Bitcoin also happens to have a full Bitcoin of inbound liquidity. So although we want to open up that possibility to someone that wants to run their own node, full control, we love that. There are some practical limitations to raising funds. And so we move inwards from that extreme self-custody of funds and self-hosting of the node and into a more user-friendly alternative, which is spinning up a node for the user and providing that liquidity. Mm-hmm. So the current solution that we're implementing is using a hosted solution to spin up a node for the project, handle the liquidity, and make it really easy for the user. So then they can completely focus on the project itself, on bringing eyes on the project, and they don't have to worry about anything around liquidity or managing the node, or if the node goes down and you can't really receive your funds anymore. Mm-hmm. So this is our current solution. And of course, we're very aware of the trade-offs. Every move in either direction of the spectrum takes you closer to either having full control, full censorship resistant, or having more trust in the process.
Right. Now, with your current node setup where you're spinning up a node and handling liquidity yourselves, do you feel constrained by the Lightning Network today in terms of liquidity? Like, what happens if a project comes on and says, we want to raise 100 Bitcoin? At what point do you start to feel like the Lightning Network itself may become a constraint? Are you already there? Is that further down the road? Like, what are your capacity restrictions from the network itself?
I wouldn't say we're there in terms of the restrictions from the network. It's more of the restrictions in terms of scaling our own solution. So getting 100 Bitcoin of inbound liquidity is possible, right? In some ways it is probably possible, but it will be very costly. Mm-hmm. And that is in part because the Lightning Network is still so early. So the free market, you could say, the competition around providing inbound liquidity is still very limited. And even the markets to discover that liquidity is very limited. Right now you have Lightning Pool by Lightning Labs. You have a derivative of that with Flow from the Voltage guys. And then it's really peer-to-peer. It's like, oh, do you run a node? Yeah, I run a node. Do you have the liquidity? Yeah, so great. Let's pair up and what's your quote, right? And in that sense, yeah, Lightning is super early. The capacity of Lightning itself is not too bad, right? It's around 3,000 Bitcoin plus, and that's the public capacity. The private one is probably a lot higher than that. So yeah, I do think that the network could, in theory, handle larger capacities in terms of liquidity. Mm-hmm. But for a business, it's certainly a challenge. It's certainly a challenge to source that liquidity, to price it right, and to make sure that it's every project can have that.
Right. Are there any other Lightning improvements? Any specific things that you would like to see that could then go on to improve the Geyser product?
Certainly. There's 2 things that come to mind. So first, to link it to the current or the previous topic, I guess, is how easy it is for people to run their own hosted node. And so I'm super excited to see what the Blockstream Greenlight wallet is going to do around that. I saw the recent announcement by the Breeze team that they want to spin up a node for the user, and then that's the important part, be able to connect it to everyone. So as a wallet, I think it makes a lot of sense to spin up a node for a user. They're going to be using that node for interacting with the entire Lightning economy. And so it makes a lot of sense. I think that that's something that I'm really excited to see how it evolves and how this cost will also be driven down by competition and have it easier for users. Um, the second answer to that was slipping my mind right now. Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Is there any other Lightning improvements that you'd like to see? Anything else that can kind of help improve the Geyser product from Lightning
Right.
perspective?
There's one topic where I've had a lot of discussions with other Lightning developers and building applications on Lightning, and that's the current inability to verify for a third party to verify that a payment has taken place. So that sounds like a very simple problem to solve, but actually looking at current solutions, it's very difficult for a platform like Geyser to not be anywhere along the route of that payment and then to be able to say that payment has successfully completed.
Right, and that's because it's a peer-to-peer transaction, right?
Exactly. So you would need some sort of system that notifies a third party that you've selected, that you trust, of course, because there are privacy implications, that you trust to broadcast that event to. And this is sort of possible if you're directly connected to a node or if you're, yeah, if you have, let's say, the macaroons of an LND node, and there's some equivalents for C Lightning nodes. But if you're using non-custodial wallets or a custodial wallet, something like Breeze or something like Blue Wallets, if you're custodial, there's no standard at the moment to let a third party know. And in the case of Geyser, the reason we would need that information is to display how many funds have actually been raised, right? So it would be a way for us to display the progress of the project. And the reason it's really, or we think it's really important that such a solution comes up is because it opens up then the door to letting the users connect to any source, or rather any destination for the funds to flow to. If they want to connect their own wallet, be that custodial, non-custodial, whatever the service, if there is a standard, then we can plug into it. And at that point, it's in a sense fully censorship resistant, at least fully financially censorship resistant, because we're completely out of the way. And we're simply providing the interface, the index of projects, and we're not handling or managing any liquidity.
Mm-hmm. Now, what do you think about from a payments perspective? I'm specifically thinking about Lightning addresses here, because I know they've got a lot of traction within the community. Do you think that is going to be the mechanism that people use to make payments over time? Do you think it's going to be scanning QR codes? Is it going to be an entirely new standard that we haven't seen yet? What's the most approachable way for someone to fund a campaign on Lightning? Where do you think we head? What direction are we going?
I think Lightning Address is a very interesting solution. It does make it pretty seamless in certain use cases. In other use cases, I think entering something like an email address is a little bit more cumbersome than scanning a QR code. And even scanning a QR code, it requires you to take out your phone to scan the QR code. So there is some friction added there. And so I guess my answer there would be, well, what platform are you on? If you're on the web, which is the case for a web app like ours, then I think something like GetAlbi is a much smoother user experience. Because in that case, you're simply loading some funds in your extension, and ideally it would be the click of a button for you to fund it. Ideally, it wouldn't even be a click of a button. There are some security trade-offs there to not get your funds completely drained. But from a user experience perspective, I think the smoothest experience you can get currently is with GetAlbi. Now, I don't think the web app is going to be the only way people can interact with Geyser. And to sort of take it a little bit further down the line, I think there is real opportunities for something like Lightning to enable transactions to happen machine to machine, right? And so I can totally imagine a scenario where you're playing your Satoshi game, or you're playing, Bitcoin Bounce, and you're earning a few Satoshis, or you're swiping your card and getting cashbacks, and then you've decided that a portion of that is going to go towards Bitcoin education, or towards certain projects that you enjoy or would like to support on Geyser. And in that case, the user doesn't have to do anything. It's not about Lightning addresses, it's not about QR codes, it's not even about GetAlbi. It's simply about selecting where your funds are going to go. And so that becomes a very interesting idea, because now your time spent in the metro playing some game to make the time pass is contributing a few sats and showing support to projects on Geyser, for example.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. That's something that I'm also seeing in the podcast space in a different context, which is splits. I don't know if you're familiar with, like, some of the Lightning podcasts have multiple co-hosts, or they have like a producer, or Fountain would take a split, the podcast index. So anytime someone sends a payment, it instantly gets split among all the different parties that are involved. One thing that I really want to be able to set up, and I think it's on the horizon, is being able to have guests come onto this show and instantly be able to just, like, send me your Lightning address or something, and send me some like easy human readable name, and I can instantly add you as a split to the show. And then every time sats come in, half go to me, half go to you. Fountain takes 1%, podcast index takes 1%. Maybe a producer comes in, they take 10%, 20%, whatever, right? You can design all these splits to reward all the different people contributing. And you're right, that could totally be a tool that you put on autopilot to kind of, it could even be among podcasters. Like, you could add in a podcast, 10% of all funds that get sent in go directly to Geyser projects, or go directly to,
Totally.
I wonder, do you think this is going to be a solution for grants, for Bitcoin developer grants? Like, I know a number of people are kind of like, in the Bitcoin community, are consistently trying to raise money and raise awareness to get funds to continue developing on Bitcoin. Is that something that is going to be a major driver for Geyser?
For sure, I think we'll get there eventually. We've thought about it already quite extensively. We even made a small proof of concept for the recent Shock the Web hackathon, where we created a grants interface, exactly like you're describing it. Some grants that could go towards education, that could go towards culture. And I want to give credits to Brad Mills here for introducing us to this idea that Bitcoin culture needs to be pushed a lot more. It already exists. There's already a very strong culture around Bitcoin, but it's not put forward as much as in other spaces, I'm going to say. So yeah, grants is definitely one, and automating these contributions to grants is also certainly one. And to go back to one of your previous questions of what I would like to see in the Lightning tech as a useful evolution, is seeing that at the protocol level. As far as I know, this is still, you could do that with a service like LNbits to do these split payments, or you could do it at a higher level of abstraction. But I would love to see native Lightning splits where you could really send it to Lightning nodes. And eventually, the ideal scenario is that everyone is running a node, and then you can just forward the payment directly to them.
Right. How do you think about? I want to touch back on one of the comments you made earlier about the how the current or fiat crowdfunding platforms got focus right, and they kind of found Kickstarter found a community of artists and designers and creators, and a very like niche community, and was able to grow that into a big business. How do you think about that split as you talk about culture? How do you think about, whether or not you should be focused on just a specific segment of Bitcoiners, whether you should be focused on creators or developers or people looking to run conferences, or whether you should have a really broad crowdfunding platform? How do you think about that strategy in getting from your current stage as a nascent startup to becoming a larger kind of crowdfunding platform?
Sure. Well, who are we to tell, right? The market tells us. So I'm not going to say that we have a clear path drawn in front of us. When we first launched Apata's project, we got a lot of interest from people. We got around 20 different requests to launch projects. And when we look at the split of projects that we got requests from, around 30% of them were around gaming. Around 30% or 25% or so were around education. A smaller split was on humanitarian aid, and then the remainder was equity-based, people that wanted to launch businesses. And we took this split very, very seriously. Those are obviously very different categories, but we saw them as the main ones that people, or at least project creators, were interested in. And this month, we're actually calling it the Bitcoin Game Month. So we're launching three separate projects, all in the theme of gaming. The first one was by Craig Deutsch. He launched literally the Bitcoin game. It's a board game to learn about Bitcoin mining and sort of how Bitcoin works. That was genius, right? Like, what's a better way than to play along with your family and teach them about Bitcoin? The second one that we launched just today is Day of Genesis, and that's a digital card game where you can lock a few Satoshis, play competitions with people, and then win those Satoshis as you win the competition. And the third one coming along is an arcade game. Again, like a virtual game, you can earn some sats by playing it. And this is nothing that I'm taking credit for. I mean, Satoshi Games, Thunder Games, Zebedee, they were there way before, and they've been preaching that message for some time. And I want to give credit to these guys because it's true. It's a different avenue towards adopting Bitcoin. And I'm going to quote, I think it's Elizabeth Stark that says, Bitcoin for the millions and not the millionaires.
Yeah.
And in a similar vibe, Ray Youssef is saying Bitcoin for the 100%. And well, if you think about these people, well, having access to Satoshis, having access to Bitcoin through games is a very smooth way to start interacting with that ecosystem. In fact, I believe Apata, the creator of the first project, first interacted with Bitcoin through a game. That's how he got to know it. The moderator of some game he was playing at the time knew about Bitcoin and introduced him to the idea, and then I think he sent him some Bitcoin over, and so that's how he got introduced into it. And that was not even using Satoshis in the game. So imagine now if you're able to just play a game and earn some sats. I mean, the teenage me or young me would have been very happy today to have the sats that he won.
Do you think that earning sats right now is a constraint on Geyser? Because it's something that I've come to realize, being pretty close to a number of startups in the Lightning space, is that it seems like one of the biggest problems is actually getting sats in people's hands so they can then use them on the Lightning Network. Like Bitcoiners who have never experienced Lightning may have sats in cold storage, maybe don't want to use it, maybe don't want to sling it around for tax reasons or whatever. There's a number of reasons why you wouldn't want to start slinging things around, creating new wallets and whatever. But do you think that we have enough people today with sats in their hands to build this like critical mass and get this economy going, the circular economy spinning? Or do we need to is that something that you guys are prioritizing, getting more sats in more people's hands today?
We've thought about this. I think you're right. First of all, people like playing around with money that they received for free. Right? They think about it less probably, even if there is still some barrier and people want to stack sats. And what I said previously, they don't spend their Bitcoin. Well, you still have to find the things that they value for them to spend it. So giving away some sats is a nice way to take away that concern and have them play around with the platform. And we've thought about ways we could distribute some sats to people, maybe on a weekly basis or on a monthly basis, based on perhaps sponsorship that we accumulate. And then so we split the funds from the sponsorships and we let people play around with the platform. And I think we need to explore this a little bit more, and there's probably ways we haven't even thought about it. I'm curious if you have anything in mind. But earn to play or play to earn is something that we'd love to bring into Geyser, but that is not directly linked to crowdfunding.
Yeah, that's really interesting. There's going to be a lot of new ways to earn money on Lightning. We are in the beginning of the first inning right now. I mean, it's just like we have this now, it's liquid money. It can flow anywhere between anyone, any parties on the Lightning Network. Like, there's so many possibilities for how money can move. It's hard to say exactly how that's going to end up, but all I know is that I think we need more people earning today. And I think that's actually an easier way to get people to Lightning is by earning it, rather than having them go through the process of, learn about Bitcoin, buy Bitcoin, store Bitcoin, move it to Lightning, then, spend the Bitcoin that you've just learned you should never spend and you should hold on to forever. It's like, that's a painful process and it's a long process.
Of course, just look at Fold, right? Like, I think Fold is a genius product just for that. You're spending your dollars and you're getting sats back. And then you're accumulating those sats. And right now, I don't think Fold is partnering with anyone to actually let users use those sats, but I can definitely see that happening in the future.
Yeah.
And this idea that giving away sats is nice, but it's also not very sustainable. If you find a sustainable way to do it, and I believe Stacker News is on something here, because they've got their revenues from ads and then they redistribute to their users, and you get some sats rolling in every day, and that incentivizes you to use the platform, right? That's a pretty genius model.
There's going to be more of that. That's one great example of how you can sustainably get sats into the community's hands. Like, it's a flywheel, and it's just going to spin faster and faster. And there's going to be more companies that learn about it and figure out how to implement it in their own products. But that one's definitely picking up steam, and you can see the amounts people are sending in on Stacker News. It changes. Like, my first 10 posts in November, I earned 85 sats for. My last 10 posts in April, I earned 1,877 sats. 22 times more.
It can become an income, right? So
yeah,
it brings you back onto the platform.
And this is with they've got like 310 monthly active registered users on the platform right now. It's just like, I just think about like what happens when it gets to 310,000 or 310 million, and you have this big flywheel churning where advertisers can come in with maybe they can even come in with their fiat money, and they just send it, and it gets injected into the network, and it gets blasted out to all the users in proportion to how much they contribute. That's the key. It's not every user gets the same amount. So,
Exactly.
there's that element too that I think is going to be really helpful in rewarding quality users. But yeah, there's so much experimentation to be done here. This is just the beginning of the beginning for sure.
And then comes the interoperability of the services. So these Satoshis are still Satoshis. They're
Yes.
not Stacker News token or Stacker News points. So they're not locked in within the ecosystem of that website. They can actually interact with all the other ecosystems, and that benefits everyone in the end. The
Yeah.
user base of Stacker News that is growing, as we said previously, if the users want to determine a few grants or a few projects that they want their earned Satoshis to flow to, that could be Bitcoin development, it could be a particular project they've spotted on Geyser, it could be humanitarian aid, it could be anything. You can redistribute those sats just because they are sats, because this is all the Lightning Network, and because this is all within the same ecosystem.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it makes sense that companies start to partner with each other in this regard, where you have maybe there's some companies where people are earning sats and one where people are spending sats, right? Like Geyser may be one where people spend sats. And if Fold is one where people are earning sats, it makes sense to link those two together, because then you can turn
It's a real
that into a
circular economy.
multi-company flywheel.
Yeah,
It's not a
right.
flywheel within one company, it's one within the whole ecosystem. And there's many companies that are on both sides, right? Letting you earn and letting you spend, and then you can kind of like tie them together in the right ways. Yeah, you can quickly see how that grows really fast.
And there's more to that. This is about just Satoshis, but I think another aspect that people value is proving that they've done something. And I don't want to get into the whole token thing because that's not my vibe. But showing that you funded a project or that you were part of an early user in the Stacker News base or you've achieved something, that is something you also want to showcase. And when you have an ecosystem where the Satoshis are flowing freely between each other, then why not also showcase those accomplishments? And maybe those accomplishments are valued in some way as well.
So how do you think those accomplishments, what are some of the ways that you think they could be represented? Is this like a token on Lightning? Is this some kind of like badge? What does that look like in your mind?
Right. I think that's where the current Tyro announcement from a couple of days ago by Lightning Labs is going to bring a lot of attention. Or RGB, if that picks up, or Omni, or whichever solution brings that to Lightning. Because the key is making it interoperable. It's making it usable within the same network without needing a bridge, without needing a token sale or anything like that. The idea is not to have a speculative asset, is to showcase something you've done within an ecosystem.
Now, what do you think in terms of talking about tokens on Lightning? One of the constant topics of conversation on Bitcoin Twitter is around stablecoins, and whether or not there's one side that says these are important, these people want them. There's however many $200 billion of stablecoins today, and we need to provide them with some stablecoin opportunities on Lightning to be able to hold their wealth in dollars when they want it. And there's another side that says Bitcoin's the best money. We don't want anything to do with the dollar. We don't want to tie ourselves to a system that at the same time we're trying to disrupt and improve upon. Where do you fall on that spectrum? And when you think about Geyser, do you think about, do you think people will be more likely to contribute or more likely to set up fundraisers if they can receive or send in dollars?
I'm going to take Alex Gladstein's approach on this and say that you have to just look at what is happening today. And people are using stablecoins, right? Like that is undeniable. Whether you want them to use something else is a different topic. So if we're going to bring this use case to Lightning, I think people are going to use it. I don't think it's the long-term solution because, yes, as you said, Bitcoin is the better money, and that's where I think everything will converge eventually. Now, when we talk about Geyser and whether you will see more funding on the projects, I think that's something we won't really bother with at the moment, at least. And the reason I'm saying that is because I really do believe we'll start seeing more and more services like Strike in the US, like Bitnod in Nigeria. So basically, services and wallets that let you spend whatever currency you want and receive whatever currency you want, and they will operate all on Lightning. And so if you want to create a crowdfund and for whatever reason you don't want to receive Bitcoin, you want to receive something else, then there will be a service that lets you do this conversion. And it will not be up to us to decide whether that conversion can happen. Now, if we look at Strike, there's a limitation because Strike likes to say we've announced that we're global, but it's not, right? It's still constrained within the US. And so we still need more services like that. We'll still need the Strike of Europe. We'll still need the Strike of whatever country, right? We need those, or people need those. And then they will probably realize there's also limitations to where you can send those, and that's why you need Bitcoin. And so we don't really necessarily want to take a stance to say what is correct or what is not correct. I think people decide for themselves, and we just have to keep talking about the benefits of Bitcoin and why that is useful to them. And eventually, I think more people will adopt it.
Now, I want to get into one more topic. We have to cover this because I know people are going to have a lot of questions about it. And this is the Canadian truckers fundraise. I haven't followed it super closely. Maybe you have more insight into the specifics of what went on and what were some of the problems with the fundraise. Because I think they tried to raise in dollars first, that got frozen. Tried to raise in Bitcoin. And then some of those Bitcoin addresses were linked to bank accounts, and those bank accounts got frozen. There was a big mess. And again, I don't know 100% of all the details there, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on what kind of went wrong in that example and how we can, as a community, find ways to make sure that doesn't happen. That's not a bottleneck on contributing to campaigns over time.
Right. I think when you look at what happened, I think where it started is with GoFundMe. They raised a couple of million on GoFundMe, and then GoFundMe got a notice, and they had to freeze the funds. And after freezing the funds, they decided, and I'm not sure if they went through with it, but they announced at least that they would redistribute the funds as they see fit, and not even return them to the users. So they were freezing the funds and they were redistributing them. So the outrage was pretty justified in my opinion. And then the truckers turned towards, I believe it was Give, Send, Go, another platform. And the same thing happened. The funds got frozen. And I'm saying the funds got frozen. I think that's an important part of it. Because if we think about censorship, we have to sort of divide it into two subcategories. You have the financial censorship on one hand, and then you have the platform censorship. And Bitcoin solves the financial censorship because when you send a Bitcoin payment, once it's broadcasted and once it's verified, no one's going to stop that. It's uncensorable. It's, once you've received it, it's unconfiscatable. So that piece is solved. And if there had been a platform like GoFundMe, say Geyser, that the funds are flowing through, then they couldn't have frozen the funds. And that, I believe, is the main issue. Now, the problem that is not solved by Bitcoin and is not solved by Geyser either in this case is the platform censorship. And that is at the platform's discretion, or if they've been coerced, to remove a project that is on their platform. So they remove the visibility to the project, they censor the project or the project creator, and so they prevent their ability to raise more funds after that. But the funds that have been raised, they cannot be confiscated, and that's really important. So in the case of Geyser, we're not um, aiming at the moment to be censorship resistant in terms of platform censorship. We're still a platform. We're still operating on the normal Web 2, if you want to call it that. Um, but we want to provide a platform where people can still find each other, find the project that they like, and sort of coordinate this fundraising. Now, in the future, as the technology progresses, there may be ways in which this will become decentralized as well, where protocols start to build on top of that, and we're completely open to that. And we're following that very closely, where then the platform censorship itself will be solved.
What do you think some of those solutions look like? Like to solve that platform censorship, how would you go about trying to do that today?
Well, we have to look at where the problem is, and the problem is in the hosting. Who's hosting the data and who's giving access to that data, right? And in this case, and in the case of all Web2 internet companies, the company is hosting that data, and they're hosting it in the cloud, and that is centralized. So the problem is well known, I think. The solution to that problem is sort of theoretically known, but it's not been solved yet. And that is finding a way to distribute that data in a way that is scalable, right? That you can reach the same usability as with a centralized platform, and where the incentives are aligned for people to host that data in the first place. And that's perhaps something that Lightning can solve by incentivizing that through microtransactions, for example.
And is that something that you could use like a network of nodes to solve? Like if everyone was running their own node, does that problem start to become solvable where you can now distribute some of the data across the different nodes instead of having it hosted on a central server?
The advantage of a central server is that you have a central point of truth. When you decentralize the data, you no longer have this central point of truth. And so what one user sees may be different from what another user sees. And depending, let's take the example of Nostr that Fiat Jaff is working on. I think this is what it is. It's a network of relayers that decide what information they're going to broadcast and relay. So every node in the system is not going to be a relayer. Probably it's going to be a subset, and each one will have their own model as to how they want to relay that information and get paid for it. But the problem that persists is then how many relayers do you have to connect to have the full picture? What type of information do you want to follow? And in the context of crowdfunding, you could be connecting to the Geyser relayer that is showing you a particular subset or set of projects. And if for whatever reason that relayer go down, you point to another relayer. But you'll never know if you're getting the exact same subset of projects.
I see. Okay, I want to transition to thinking about the future of Geyser. Is there anything on your, maybe can you highlight some of the items on your roadmap and some of the progress you guys are trying to make in the next year? And I'm specifically thinking about any new features you guys are trying to incorporate, anything that you're excited about bringing to the Bitcoin community?
Well, I'll start with what we're announcing today, and that is we're bringing a set of smaller features. We're bringing reward-based crowdfunding. So it is not just about donating, as was the case for the first project, but it's also about getting something in return. You can think of it a little bit like a Kickstarter. It's a similar process, but every payment is processed in Bitcoin. Then we're introducing on-chain payments. Because of what I mentioned previously, there is most of the value that is transferred over there. And maybe eventually we'll get it out again and remove on-chain, but I think today people have shown they want to use it. We also have a different set of social features with leaderboards. You have badges that you can earn depending on your contribution. So that is today, right? But in the bigger picture, I think crowdfunding is really the first stepping stone is the first, it's one component, let's say, of the greater, the bigger picture. And that is what we would like to achieve with Geyser is to take an idea from the idea all the way to, as I said before, the implementation. And what that looks like is, in some cases, starting a business and maybe raising equity for that business. And so when we look at all the intermediate steps, what makes an idea into a successful, first off, idea and then a successful business, that will be what we want to analyze, figure out, and provide the best tool and the best platform for people to do that. And the interesting or important components that we've already highlighted today is the community, the social aspect that is crucial in creating an idea and a successful idea. The first phases, you have people that are going to have a lot of different feedback and provide you that feedback. And so the ideation phase is very chaotic, right? You start with one idea and then you receive feedback and you change your mind, or someone else changes their mind, or it forks into two different ideas. This whole process is very chaotic. In fact, the person that has the idea initially might not even be the person that ends up implementing it. Maybe they were just, they were browsing Twitter, they saw something interesting, they had an interesting thought, but they're not really entrepreneurial. But they want a spot where they can drop it and where community can pick it up and then make it real. And then maybe you start with donations, right? Maybe you want to start with a proof of concept. So you're waving at the community and you're saying, hey, we brought this idea into this next step. Now let's try it out. And we need some funds for that. And let's say it's successful, then you take it to the next step. And that might be reward based. Maybe you have a first product that you can sell, give some perks to people. And finally, you grow the project and you might go into equity.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you speak about going to equity, how does that connect to the existing regulations around equity fundraising? Like, I know there are some crowdfunding platforms that do raise in equity, and there are certain limitations they have. Do you think Bitcoin crowdfunding gets around some of these issues? Do you think Bitcoin has to play by the rules that have been set in the kind of pre-internet or pre-Bitcoin era? Or do you think those rules change to adapt to Bitcoin in a situation where, money can just flow really easily, and all of a sudden it doesn't make sense to restrict, only accredited investors or only X number of dollars per fundraise? What are your thoughts on the regulatory side of this?
Well, I'll start off by saying that's really not my expertise. So whatever I say is kind of my hand-wavy opinion on the topic. I think the main limitation is that when you're talking about equity, you're talking about securities. And securities have a legal framework that you still want, right? As a project creator, you still want some of these protections. You don't necessarily want all of the protections where you only give access to that to accredited investors and such, but you still want a legal framework around your company. And I think that is not something that Bitcoin necessarily directly solves, because if I'm in Europe and I'm investing in a company in the US, how much can they do to protect themselves, and how much can I protect myself? This, I think, is still problems that are pending to be solved. The thing that I do think Bitcoin may solve, and assets on top of Lightning may solve, is the fact that we don't want to use paper shares anymore. We don't want to trust some broker or whatever that is holding those papers that you've never seen, and for which there were, until Robinhood, there were no fractions of. Right? This is not what the digital age is going to be about. So this is definitely something that I believe will happen. Natively digital shares that can be subdivided up to very tiny fractions. And at that point, if you've solved the accounting system that is linked to, fractions of a share, then why limit who can invest in that? Why limit the minimum that you can invest? This should be probably the decision of the business owner. How many
Mm,
people do they want to have as investors? If you put this limit very low, then you open the door to having 100,000 people that can invest in your business, and maybe that's too much for you to handle. So in that case, let's see what the free market decides. But I think the business owner should have a say, and not necessarily too much investor protection is a thing.
mm. That's really interesting that you brought up, being able to natively represent equity on something like Lightning. Is this something that you think Taro enables? Taro, like Lightning Labs' recent announcement, is that something that, like, do you see a world? You got my head spinning with ideas here. Do you see a world where equities of all kind can be represented on Lightning in the same way that, I think in Taro's blog post they mentioned that all the different kind of fiat currencies could be represented on Lightning, right? You can represent all sorts of stable coins. Can you also do equities?
My technical understanding of Taro is still pretty limited, but I will say in theory, if you can represent assets, you can probably represent equity as well. Equity is a form of asset with the difference that it falls within a jurisdiction. And something that's interesting about the Lightning Network is that you break apart from the consensus limitation that the base layer has, in the sense that on the base layer, the set of rules that you follow is the set of rules that everyone follows and that the majority sort of has to follow. On a network like Lightning, the rules that people follow are loosely defined. And if, as a node, you decide to follow different rules, then you sort of detach from the network or the part of the network that doesn't agree with those rules. You can still communicate on the rules that you do agree with, but on the rules that you don't agree with, you're kind of part of a different sub-network. And so there could be a world where equities operate within a sub-network of nodes that have a lot more legal restrictions than the nodes that simply transfer anonymous assets or transfer Bitcoin in itself.
That's really interesting. A lot to think about. That Taro announcement the other day was quite
Lots
something.
of expectations, and someone has to build it.
Yeah, yep, 100%. Yeah, it's a long way before I think any of that gets implemented, but very exciting to see that being brought into the mainstream discussion on Lightning. Okay, one more final question for you. What is your favorite Lightning application to use today? Is there anything interesting that you've been playing around with that you want everyone to know about and that maybe people haven't quite recognized yet?
That's a tough one. I use a few. Well, this is a boring one, but I've discovered Zeus and started using Zeus a bit recently,
The
which
mobile
I
wallet?
thought was the mobile wallet, right? Which I think we think about mobile wallets as the obvious step and kind of the boring aspect of the infrastructure, but it's really critical. And if we don't have enough mobile wallets, if we don't have enough options, then your entry into this world is also limited. So we want as many wallets and as many good wallets as possible out there to really have the best set of choices and the best wallet in the end that emerges from those. Um, Now for the slightly funnier one, and I'm not sure if that qualifies as a Bitcoin or Lightning application, but just yesterday I discovered a little guy called Sam on Twitter. He's a 9-year-old Bitcoin game developer,
Really?
and yeah, yeah, and he built a few games that don't have Lightning integrated into them yet, but he's working towards it, and he's definitely a Bitcoiner. And so I was playing his game yesterday, trying to break a record in how quickly you can finish the game. And I think that sums it up for me. There's so many bright minds, and the future is so bright with Bitcoin. There's so many smart people that are working towards a common goal that it really does feel pretty unstoppable. And so Sam was just a little glimpse of that future, and I'm sure he's going to be building a lot of interesting games around that.
That's very cool to see. And I agree. I think there's in the last 6 months or so, I've been really impressed with the pace of innovation in Lightning. It seems like it's picking up steam, and there's a lot of really smart people building in the space. Not to say that everything's perfect. I think there's a long way to go in getting more people to be Bitcoin developers and to get people more on board with the ecosystem. But it's a good sign. I think we're headed in a good direction, and excited to see where this all ends up.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for taking the time to chat today. This was awesome. I'm really excited about what you're building with Geyser as well. For people who haven't heard of Geyser, where can they go to learn more about Geyser and about you?
So we have a website called geyser.fund. You can find us on Twitter at geyserfund, myself at Stelios Sats, and my co-founder at Metamic14. So please reach out. We see so many people having interesting ideas. And if you have, if you want to create a meetup, a conference, anything related to Bitcoin and would like to raise some funds for it, we'd love to help you out.
Awesome. Thanks so much for taking the time, and hope we
Thanks
can
for
do this
having
again
me
soon.
on.
Welcome to the Lightning Round presented by Voltage, the industry standard for Lightning Network infrastructure. Creating layer 2 applications and services on Bitcoin starts with Voltage, where you can spin up nodes, get access to liquidity, optimize your node, and much more. Voltage is leading the way as the next generation platform for Lightning, and if you want to check them out, you can get a free trial at voltage.cloud. Time for the lightning round. In the last 7 days, you guys sent in 25,529 sats. It's 13 different supporters, sent in 9 different messages. Real quick, let's run through some of the top 5 supporters of the week. Rustin sent in 4,900 sats. BTC Rich sent in 4,116. Jeffrey sent in 3,920. Dave Jones sent in 3,491. And Y sent in 2,470 sats. Thank you all for sending in sats. I really appreciate it. And we are back on a tear. The sats are flowing in faster than they were a couple weeks ago, creating a lot more content, and glad to see you guys are enjoying it. Quickly, let's run through a few messages here. We've had 4 new messages come in the last couple days. BTC Rich says, nice one, in response to episode 35 with Lisa Nighet. That one is, I learned so much from that episode. Definitely give that one a listen if you have not listened to it already. We also got a comment on that same episode from Dave Jones, who said, fantastic episode. Loved hearing Lisa's thoughts on the ecosystem. Rustin said, great show in response to episode 34 with Corey Clipston. And Jeffrey also says, great show in response to episode 34. Says, really enjoyed hearing from the founders behind these Bitcoin brands. Great to hear their long-termism. Keep up the great work, Kevin. Thank you, Jeffrey. Keep sending in sats, and I'll keep creating content. I really appreciate all you guys sending in sats so far. Let me know what you guys think of this episode. I've got another one coming out in a few days, but excited to hear your thoughts on this one, and I'll see you soon.